Thank you so much, Dr. Rula, today for sharing with us. My first thought is, what a timely message. And my second thought is, what a theological feast she has treated us. This is a timely message on peace and reconciliation, and we need it so much when we look at the world around us today, with rising global tensions and raging conflicts in Syria, Sudan, Ukraine, Dr. Rula's own Israel-Palestine, or Palestine-Israel, Iran, Haiti, Myanmar, just to name a few. The global magazine Foreign Policy hosted a conversation earlier this month asking, can the world do anything about conflict in 2025? And this is a question we need to ask ourselves. Can the Hong Kong Church do anything about conflict in 2025? I hope after hearing Dr. Rula's talk today, our answer to this question is a resounding yes. At least, not the answer, I'll know. What Dr. Rula has gifted us today are two things. First, a vision of seeing peace and reconciliation as part and parcel of what being a Christ follower is, and in fact, of what being fully human is. Second, we need a practical way of life and a way forward to realize this vision. And Dr. Rula has shown us that we can draw from the lived experiences and rich theological insights of our brothers and sisters from around the world. We are not doing this alone. What does it mean to have a vision of peace building as part and parcel of what being fully human is? The title of Dr. Rula's talk holds half the answer: peace and identity. The other half lies in a word she mentioned 55 times in her talk just now. I did count. The word is relationships. Peace has to do with identity, and identity has to do with relationships. Dr. Rula draws from 4 distinct cultural and theological perspectives to show us how peace and identity are deeply interconnected. I quote, "False embrace connects identity and peace by showing that true identity is formed through openness to the other." The South African Ubuntu is translated as, "I am who I am because of who we are." The Middle Eastern Suha highlights identity as tied to honor and dignity, which are restored through communal rituals of forgiveness and reconciliation. And the East Asian Guanxi sees people not as separate individuals, but as part of a web of social interactions. In other words, our very identity hinges on our interconnectedness with others, where others include those who may share very few common interests with us, those whom we may find unfamiliar, strange, objectionable, or even abhorrent, to use the words of Dr. David Harrison in his article, Choosing the Impossible Love. I don't know about you, but being a Christian in Hong Kong, where everyone is always busy, and given that I'm Asian and Chinese who always likes to do, okay, pardon my gross stereotype here, okay, I often have people encourage me or remind me, being a Christian is not about doing, it's about being. I'm always encouraged to practice the spiritual discipline of being. But Dr. Rula's talk today gives this being a further push, a deeper dimension. This being is not being in and of itself, but being in relation with. Or to use Dr. Carver Yu's language in his book, Being in Relation, is being in communion with. It's actually 4 words, being in communion with, but they are hyphenated, so I pronounce it as 1 word, being in communion with. Okay. Put simply, you can't just stand alone in a room, close the door, and just be. You can only be when you fully immerse yourself in relation with others, when you are in communion with, being in and with and through and for God, others, yourself, and creation. Dr. Carver Yu calls this interpenetration. If our identity is being in communion with instead of just being, then moving towards relations is what makes us more human, and moving away is what isolates us. Our natural tendency is to move towards relations that make us comfortable and to avoid conflicts and move away from relations that make us feel small or make us angry or fearful. But as Dr. Rula points out, God's welcoming of hostile humanity into divine communion sets the example of how we are to move towards relations that do not make us comfortable. Moving towards relations necessitate entering the messiness of life, entering into conflicts and violence and where the enemies are, in order to encounter, engage, and embrace. It is in such encounter, engage, and embrace that we grow in our humanity and Christ-likeness. So the vision of reconciliation that Dr. Rula gives us today is that reconciliation is not just an event, a one-time thing, but it's a way of life grounded in trust, respect, and shared responsibility. Reconciliation is a lifelong journey of always choosing to move towards and not move away. Peace and harmony, whether within our families, within our churches, our societies, or around the world, are not the absence of conflicts, but active, intentional cultivation of relationships, of always choosing to move towards. Speaking of lifelong journey, this is where our Chinese-ness helps us. Every one of us knows small water, long flow. 細水長流，細水長流. Dr. Rula shares about a uniqueness of Guanxi theology, which is that we, as in Chinese and Asians, are pretty good at engaging in informal daily practices, such as banquets, gift-giving, home visits, and favor exchanges, using these daily rituals and reciprocal exchanges to sustain long-term relationships and collective stability. This is a bit different from the formal Fanting rituals and public ceremonies such as honor rituals, ceremonial meals, and heavy silence rituals that the Middle Eastern Suha process employs. In Guanxi, we also understand blood is thicker than water, 血濃於水，血濃於水. Typically, it means familial bonds will always be stronger than our other relationships. But as Christians, we are asked to expand our moral imagination, our Christian imagination, to expand who we consider as our blood, to include even our enemies, to include all of creation who have been covered and reconciled to God by the blood of the Lamb. The blood of the Lamb is thicker than water. 羔羊嘅血濃於水，家人的血濃於水. This is a phrase that I made up, okay? But it is an image that I see in Ephesians 2:14-22. In Ephesians, Paul says, Jesus' purpose was to create in himself one new humanity out of the two, thus making peace, and in one body to reconcile both of them to God through the cross, by which he put to death their hostility. 羔羊嘅血濃於水. Now, if we go back to the question I asked earlier, the question to which I hope your answer is not, I don't know. Can the Hong Kong Church do anything about conflict in 2025? The answer is not just yes, but the answer can only be yes. Being a Hong Konger, always pragmatic, I can almost anticipate your follow-up question. How? H-O-W. That's the difficult part, but also the easy part. Difficult because reconciliation is a spiritual act. It requires the spiritual disciplines of presence, of listening, of self-reflection, of vulnerability, of accompaniment, of self-sacrificial love, and of communal accountability. But it is also easy because reconciliation is a spiritual act. It is being done by brothers and sisters all over the world, and it has already been accomplished by the life, death, and resurrection of our Lord Jesus Christ. All we need to do is to participate in his work. Allow me to share a little bit of my journey. I was born in Hong Kong in the 80s, the golden era of Hong Kong, at least the golden era of Canto pop and Hong Kong movies. My grandparents lived through the Cultural Revolution, but my parents grew up in loving, peaceful environments. I have not seen war, nor heard of war from my parents or my peers. Fast forward to 2019. The world has changed. Hong Kong has changed. I needed to make sense of what was happening, but I didn't have the language or the vocabulary or the cognitive categories for it. I didn't have to think about conflicts, polarization, national security, or civil disobedience before. But now I need the language, the theology even, of conflict. I need the theology of peace, the theology of suffering, and the theology of reconciliation. I need them to make sense of my world. And theologies are never just words on a piece of paper. They are never abstract mental constructs. Theologies are lived experiences, the sweat, blood, and tears of real individuals born out of real encounters with the living God. My first time being in contact with forgiveness was when I was a student in the US. I met a mother who was suffering from severe depression. She shared that she lived in the suburbs, had a beautiful house, and a wonderful neighbor. She had 2 girls, 2 and 4 years old, and they were the same age as her neighbor's kids. The 4 kids went to the same preschool and always played together. The 2 moms were best friends, and they often went to each other's house for afternoon tea. Then one day, the neighbor was backing out her car from the garage, and she accidentally hit and killed the mother's 2 girls. The mother was devastated, but she could not bring herself to hate her neighbor, who was her best friend. She also could not bear to stay in that neighborhood, where she would see the guilt on her friend's face and also see her friend's kids every day. So she left and had been fighting severe depression ever since. But she was still in touch with her friend. I asked her, but it was more like a question to myself. How could you possibly forgive when someone had killed a child? This was a question that has returned to me again and again. I work at a Christian NGO called Cedar Fund in Hong Kong, and we do poverty alleviation, development, and relief work in different parts of the world, including conflict zones. I was visiting our field partners in Myanmar a year and a half ago. Hong Kong people know about Myanmar now because of KK Yuan, the forced scamming compounds. Since the military coup in 2021, Myanmar has been suffering from a devastating but underreported civil war. The war has killed more people than any other armed conflict in the world in the period 2021 to 2024. Over 52,000 people have been killed and 3 million people displaced. I talked with a 15-year-old boy, we can call him Henry. His family has 3 boys, and he's the middle child. Out of the 3 boys, his father picked him and sold him for $4,000 to be a child soldier. Our field partner in Myanmar rescued Henry from human trafficking and is now taking care of him in the youth center, where there are 160 kids from 5 years old all the way to 20. Our partner, we can call her Jane, invited me to their evening worship time, which they hold every day. I had a great time singing and dancing in their big hut, watching the kids dance, and praying and worshiping together. Jane shared with me her own story. She had been quite close to Aung San Suu Kyi's administration. After the military coup, Jane's sister and brother-in-law were assassinated. That's the word Jane used. They were killed by the military. Jane has every reason to hate the military and to stand on the side of the resistance forces and to fight back. But she did not do that. She recognized that her calling is to love and serve the children in Myanmar, especially those who are poor, marginalized, and displaced. To do that, she has to be on working terms with all parties, including the military, the PDF, People's Defense Force, and the different ethnic armed groups, all having their own agenda. Because there are some regions that are more under the control of the military, some that are more under the control of the resistance forces and ethnic armed groups, and some regions where everyone is fighting for control over. In order to be able to go in as a civilian and do the work, whether it's humanitarian relief or children and youth development, you need to be on friendly terms with all parties. Jane is a person whom I see who is continuously choosing to move towards the other and towards the enemy. They have killed her sister and brother-in-law. She can choose to shy away or avoid those people and those relationships. But she chooses to forgive, to engage, and to embrace. And by engaging and embracing, she finds friends on all sides, friends both within the military and within the resistance forces. The product village that we are working on today, together with Jane, is now called a peace village by the locals in the region. When my colleagues and I first heard the name and learned that people are calling the village a peace village, we were baffled. Okay? Where did the word come from? What do you mean by peace village when it's in the middle of a conflict zone? Where do you see the peace in the peace village? I was really baffled. And I still don't know the answer. All I know is when you love God and love neighbor including your enemy, people can see it. People can feel it. Even non-Christians can see the peace that only Christ can offer. And this peace will overflow and encompass the entire community, so much so that others will recognize yours is a peace village, and may God's name be glorified. How do we choose the impossible love? How does the Hong Kong Church live out reconciliation as a way of life? How do we enter into pain, violence, and conflicts and continuously choose to engage and embrace? I know it is possible. Our brothers and sisters around the world have lived it out and are living it out. We have so much to learn from them. A big thank you to Dr. Ruler for sharing with us these precious and hard-earned gems of wisdom today. Thank you.